You think you know the story of Pinocchio, a mischievous puppet whose nose grows when he lies, whose wooden limbs tangle in strings, and whose dream is to become a real boy. Many know the cheerful Disney version, a kindly carpenter, a singing cricket, a magical fairy, and a happy ending. But like so many classic tales, the version now taught to children has been scrubbed of the darkness that once defined it. Carlo Collodi did not write a sweet bedtime fantasy. He crafted a scathing parable about poverty, hunger, and exploitation. The puppet S tale was born just as Italy emerged from the turmoil of unification. The Risorgimento had knit together a collection of states into a new nation by 1861, but the aftermath was messy. The Industrial Revolution had begun to reshape work and family life, and the country was awash with destitute children. Authorities debated how to stop poor youngsters from becoming beggars or criminals. Some called for compulsory education and child labour laws. Collodi, born Carlo Lorenzini in Florence, was a veteran of Italy's wars of independence and a satirist. Through his pseudonym, he poured his anxieties about a nation in flux into a serialized story, first published in a children's newspaper. His intent was to admonish young readers and reflect the grim realities of their lives. The original Pinocchio is not simply a naughty puppet who lies. He is carved from a piece of wood destined for a chair leg. The wood speaks even before it becomes a puppet, foreshadowing a restless spirit. Pinocchio's maker, Geppetto, is poor. He dreams that his puppet might help him earn some coins. But as soon as Pinocchio has feet, he kicks his maker and runs into the streets. He tells the talking cricket that school and work do not interest him. He would rather eat, sleep, play, and wander. When the cricket warns him that laziness leads to illness and prison, Pinocchio hurls a hammer and kills him. Disney turned the cricket into a lovable moral compass. Collodi made him an inconvenient voice of conscience, and Pinocchio silenced him. Collodi's Italy was full of children like Pinocchio. Reformers feared that without firm guidance, they would remain ragazzi di strada street urchins who loitered, begged, and resisted authority. Schooling and apprenticeships were scarce, and work was often dangerous. Many children were sold or leased by their families to masters in exchange for money or gifts. On the island of Sicily, the practice was formalized in the sulfur mines. The children were called carusi. Families or foundling homes handed them over for a payment known as succursu di morti, literally a death benefit, effectively making them the property of the mine owners. Recruited as young as 5, these boys lived and worked underground, hauling heavy loads of ore on their shoulders for 8 to 10 hours a day. Each child was expected to carry more than his small body could handle, 25 to 30 kilos for the youngest, and up to 80 kilos by age 16. The work bent their spines and stunted their growth. They ate and slept near the tunnels. Few ever left the mines. Reports from the era describe the brutality of the Carusi system. 2 Italian politicians, Leopoldo Franchetti and Sidney Sonnino, investigated the mines in 1876 and wrote of children carrying back-breaking loads along dangerous stairways with no light. A journalist named Adolfo Rossi later noted that boys as young as 8 had hunched shoulders, hollow eyes from malnutrition, and wrinkled foreheads. Although laws supposedly banned children under 12 from the mines, they were not enforced. Wages were paid in poor quality flour instead of money. Booker T. Washington, touring Europe in 1910, likened the mines to hell itself. He wrote that the children were beaten, pinched, and had their legs singed with lanterns to keep them working. Those who tried to escape were captured and sometimes killed. Sir Thomas Oliver, a British doctor, witnessed boys climbing steep steps with heavy oar in darkness, slipping and tumbling into others, causing injuries. He measured some adult miners who started as carusi and found them barely 4 feet tall, with deformed chests and minds still like children. Elsewhere in Europe, factories devoured children. In the 19th century, boys and girls in textile mills, mines, and workshops worked 13 to 15 hours a day on tasks that machines could not yet perform. From as young as 8, children reattached broken threads under looms, cleaned bobbins, and pushed carts through narrow galleries. They earned a fraction of adult wages, yet families relied on their income. Long hours and dangerous machinery left many maimed or dead. Across Europe, public opinion slowly turned, and laws banning child labour and mandating education were introduced. In Italy, the 1873 law forbade children from working as wandering entertainers, and the 1877 Capino law required schooling until age 9. These reforms mirrored Collodis' themes that children must be educated and industrious to avoid tragedy. Another chapter of Italian exploitation played out on the streets of foreign cities. From the mid-19th century onward, thousands of Italian children were trafficked abroad as street musicians. Known as musicanti vagabondi, they were often boys under 10 who had been kidnapped or leased by their parents to padroni. The padrone, or master, forced them to play barrel organs, accordions, or violins in cities from New York to London. The boys had to hand over all money they earned, and if they failed to bring enough, they were beaten and starved. A newspaper clipping from the New York Herald in 1869 offered a reward for Bernardo Roselli, aged 10, noting that he had been leased to a maestro named Saverio Gallo. The article recounts how Roselli escaped after 2 years of enforced street performance. Another survivor, Levi Malona, recalled that he and his brother were kidnapped in Italy, shipped to America, and held captive in a house with other boys. They were flogged when they did not collect enough coins. Many of these boys died young, worn out by hunger and abuse. Collodi wove these social realities into Pinocchio's journey. After killing the cricket, Pinocchio is caught by a carabiniere and returned to Geppetto, who is thrown in jail for child abuse. The puppet then meets Mangiafuoco, a travelling puppeteer who exploits marionettes for his show. Mangiafuoco initially threatens to burn Pinocchio as firewood, but spares him when Pinocchio pleads for Geppetto. In this scene, Collodi highlights the constant threat of violence hanging over destitute children. Soon after, the fox and the cat dupe Pinocchio out of his gold coins and hang him from an oak tree, leaving him to die. This was Collodis' intended ending a puppet lynched for his gullibility. Under pressure from editors, he revived Pinocchio and continued the story, but he added more punishment. Pinocchio skips school and is imprisoned for 4 months. He goes to the land of toys, where children play and refuse education. There, he is transformed into a donkey and sold for his hide. The donkey injures its leg while performing, so the owner drowns it to harvest the skin. Pinocchio survives as a puppet inside the body of a fish and meets Geppetto in the belly of a shark, where they are both trapped. Each of these episodes is an allegory. Pinocchio's laziness and gullibility lead directly to exploitation and near death. Mangiafuoco represents unscrupulous employers who exploit children's labor. The fox and the cat stand in for criminals who prey on naivety. The land of toys is fun at first, but becomes a prison for delinquents, a caution against truancy. The transformation into a donkey echoes the fate of Italian children forced into manual labor, treated as beasts of burden. The shark's belly is like the sulfur mines, dark, dangerous, and seemingly inescapable. Only through obedience and work does Pinocchio earn redemption. The fairy with turquoise hair, who alternately functions as mother, sister, and spectre of death, repeatedly rescues him, but demands he study and care for his father. When Pinocchio finally goes to school, supports Geppetto by weaving baskets, and shows compassion, he awakens to find himself a flesh and blood boy. Collodis' message is clear. Diligence and education can transform a wayward child into a moral citizen. Modern readers may find this morality harsh, yet for Collodis' audience, it was a lifeline. The Italian government of the late 1800s needed children to adopt a work ethic aligned with the new nation's goals. Collodis' editors encouraged him to soften the ending, but he still made Pinocchio suffer to show the consequences of disobedience. The serialized story served as social instruction and character building for the middle class. It taught children that freedom without responsibility leads to ruin. It reassured parents that the state and society were taking steps to protect and educate the young. At the same time, Collodis' vivid depictions of hunger, poverty, and exploitation served as an indictment of the conditions that forced many Italian families to put their children in harm's way. The difference between Collodis' version and Disney's adaptation illustrates how societies sanitize their past. Disney removed the hanging, the prison, the donkey slaughter, and the gruesome death of the cricket. Geppetto becomes a kindly craftsman, rather than a poor woodcarver hoping to profit from his puppet. The fox and the cat are comedic villains. The coachman's transformation of boys into donkeys is toned down. The blue fairy is purely benevolent. The film focuses on honesty rather than labor, and the story resolves with a happy family. By contrast, the original story left readers unsettled, aware that a misstep could lead to starvation, disfigurement, or death. As we revisit Pinocchio today, it is important to see the puppet's strings as more than physical controls. They symbolize the economic and social forces that ensnared children in Collodis' time and still ensnare many today. When Pinocchio cuts his strings and runs away, he falls into other traps because he has not yet learned how to navigate the world. Likewise, Italian street musicians freed from one padrone might find themselves enslaved by another. Carusi, released from the mines, had few prospects. The puppet's yearning to become a real boy reflects the desire of exploited children to have agency over their lives, to be treated as human beings rather than instruments for profit. Child labor and exploitation have declined dramatically since the 19th century, but they have not vanished. Around the world, millions of children still work in hazardous conditions in factories, mines, and on the streets. Trafficking networks continue to exploit minors as beggars, entertainers, and laborers. Reading Collodi's story through this lens reminds us that moral tales can also be social critiques. Pinocchio is not just about telling the truth. It is about the dangers facing uneducated, poor children and the responsibilities society has to protect them. Collodi's Italy has changed. but the spectre of child labour haunts our global economy. By revisiting the dark roots of Pinocchio, we can honour the children whose real lives informed the puppet's perilous journey. We can remember the Carusi who hauled sulphur until their bodies were bent and broken. We can remember the boys sold to padroni and sent across oceans to play violins on cold streets. We can see in Mangiafuoco and the Fox the many faces of exploitation, and we can take from the fairy's guidance a lesson still relevant. Children need education, care, and protection to escape cycles of poverty and abuse. Collodi did not shy away from horror because he wanted to shock young readers into obedience. He understood that in a world where one misstep could result in hunger, imprisonment, or death, a gentle fable might not suffice. So he wrote a story where a puppet is hanged for his foolishness, beaten by thieves, imprisoned by corrupt judges, turned into a beast, and swallowed by a monster. He wrote of a fairy who acts both as guardian and as the personification of mortality. Through fear and pain, Pinocchio learns empathy and responsibility. The story's true magic is not that a puppet becomes a boy, but that a lost child finds a way to survive in a hostile world. By stripping away the cheerful veneer and facing the story's darker origins, we can appreciate Collodis' artistry and the courage of the children whose lives inspired him. We can also recognize how literature can disguise social critique within fantasy. Pinocchio is not just a puppet on a quest for humanity. He is a mirror held up to a society that allowed children to be bought, sold, and worked to death, and a plea for a future where no child has to make the same journey.